would you describe what we just saw in Ecuador with the presidential election?
I mean, it's hard to tell. I'm not a statistician. I don't have any special insights. They basically tied on the first vote when they each got 44%, and they got the same exact number of, I don't know, let's say 4 million. It was 4 million something, but let's say 4 million. And then a month later, after she gets this endorsement of the indigenous political party, a guy who ran in the first round and got 5%, which is a big deal because Conai is very skeptical of the non-indigenous left, but they supported her.
Luisa Gonzalez, right?
Luisa Gonzalez. In the second round, her vote increases 0. And then he gets like 2 million more votes. And he's a Trump-like, he's a Bukele Trump, he's within that clown car. Has close alliances with Eric Prince. Eric Prince was down there campaigning. Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater and now whatever it's called, Academy. And he was down there campaigning for him. He's a millionaire. His father lost to Rafael Correa during the height of the post-Cold War return of the left. And he dresses like Bukele. He's good on social media. He cultivates the conspiracism. There's a way in which, the Latin American right up until about 2 decades ago was traditional. It was patrician. It was law and order. It was anti-communist. They couldn't compete against the return of the left, Chavez and Lula and Morales and all of this. They couldn't compete. And so now they've been importing all of the culture war crap from the United States, the hands off our children, groomers, the gun culture, Bitcoin, this weird libertarianism, you see it in Argentina with Javier Milei, and now you see it in Ecuador. So I don't know if it was a coup. It was suspicious. And I think the Organization of American States, which is no friend of Latin American leftists, said there was serious irregularities, but it doesn't matter because he's going to because it also is this kind of interlocking drugs, cartelization of national politics in which corruption and violence and militarism are kind of fused up until, before Ecuador, El Salvador was the model for that. Bukele is not waging a war against the gangs. He's in alliance with the gangs. He made a pact with the leaders of the gangs. For them, he said, listen, I'm going to throw you rank and file in this prison. If you clamp down, if you tone down the killings of civilians, especially, you could still go about making your money, and when everybody can profit. And he's created quite a horror show in El Salvador. And he used to be a member of the FMLN, and he's a descendant, of Palestine Christians.
Right.
Bukele. And so, but who saw this coming, though? People paying attention to Latin America for the last 5 years or 10 years have been complaining about Bukele, but nobody saw this alliance between, that all of a sudden he turned the country into the Devil's Island or a penal colony of the United States.
Right. I heard you speaking, I believe, on Democracy Now! About how there's this culture of disappearances, right, which compounds the tragedy of killing people with this uncertainty and constant struggle and kind of search for what really happened to your loved ones, and you don't know. So that there's that disappearance, and you kind of compared that almost coyness around disappearances to what's happening right now.
Yeah, that meeting they had in the White House was disgusting. The giggling and laughing about the complete impunity and the suffering that they were causing innocent people. Yeah, right. Disappearances are like the signature modality of terror in Latin America during the Cold War. And one aspect of disappearances was the state would deny, we don't know where your son went. Maybe he ran off to Cuba, maybe he ran off with a woman. Who knows? We don't know. And that uncertainty adds to the horror and the suffering because there's just deniability. Now, we have them. Fuck you. We're not giving them back. It's a different kind of fuck you impunity that is that's just you can imagine what the families of these people are feeling, the powerlessness, which is just a scaling up of the it's a different order of terror.
I want to actually show 2 clips from that meeting that you mentioned between Bukele and Trump.
Well, it's an honor to be here in the Oval Office with the president and leader of the free world. We're very happy and we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it.
President, do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to have suggested that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always CNN.
How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please?
Okay, that's great. Very funny, cute.
Well, that's what I was talking about. I'm president of the free world. The free world is Latin America has long been. I mean, Latin America is a lot of things to the United States, and one of the things it's been a repository or receptacle of the kind of cast-offs that don't fit into the imperial schema. In the 19th century, there was lots of plans to shift free people of color to Central America and other places in Latin America, and they thought that might avoid a civil war. After the Civil War was won, there was schemes to ship former slaves to Latin America, and then obviously there's the use of Guantanamo, to absorb the Haitian refugees during the crisis in the 1990s, and then enemy combatants, these new categories that the legal regime doesn't account for. What do you do with them? Well, you just ship them off somewhere, and I don't want to make too much of a kind of circling back to the argument of like the essence of the United States is to push its problems to the frontier, but in some ways this is certainly a symbol of it. It's not going to be anything substantial in terms of hundreds of thousands of people, but it's at least symbolizes the notion that like we deal with our problems by just casting them off, by pushing them beyond the boundary.
And what are your thoughts? I mean, I had an Uber driver the other day, a Lyft. I had to take one because I had Bucky with me, my dog, and I had to take him. And he's really cute. I'll show you him later. But I had an Uber driver or a Lyft driver, and he had great critique of Trump and his, racism and how terrible he was being to undocumented people, or documented as we're seeing now. But then he was from El Salvador, and this guy said how much he liked Bukele because he was, cleaning things up, making people safe.
Well, people are taught, people are poor and people are hungry and people are tired of the violence. And in places like El Salvador, it was unbearable. I mean, you'd be extorted for running a small business, for being a bus driver. And there's a certain appeal there. Now, that said, the social democratic heritage of Latin America has been able to contain the right to some degree. More people live under countries, and I'm not even including Venezuela and Nicaragua here. More Latin Americans live under governments that call themselves social democratic, than they do under right-wing governments. But still, it's a powerful. It's the importation of the culture wars in societies that are desperate and hungry is a powerful attraction, and it's the same kind of shit here. It's like more like world building conspiracism, rather than any attempt to establish a kind of stable legitimacy or hegemony, right? And the culture wars are impossible to wind down because it's never about one thing. It's about grooming. It's about this, and then it's about that. Then it's about paper straws. Then it's about, and the same terms are imported into Latin America, but not everywhere, right? So, I mean, this Bolivia, a lot of countries are on knife edges, like, Lula won in Brazil, but just barely. But you have Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico. Yeah. I mean, a child of Jewish refugees, communist Jewish refugees, a science climate scientist who is trying to revive the roots of the Mexican Revolution, the socialist roots of the Mexican Revolution. And, she's operating in a very to the north, she has the United States. Within Mexico, she has like a class of super billionaires that became so because of the privatization of the 1980s and 1990s. And, and then there's the military. And it's amazing. She's, Morena has been able to create a certain kind of electoral hegemony and legitimacy that has now run through 2 presidents, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. And it's all basic stuff, like we're going to send doctors to old people's houses to check in on them, and we're going to expand neonatal care, and we're going to basic social welfare stuff.